Why the truth of oneness has never reached mass consciousness, I would actually disagree. I think there have been civilizations in the past that lived that oneness, whether in a simple ecological way or as a community. I think that there have been, just as there have been whole civilizations that lived with a symbolic consciousness. I think that we are the odd civilization. We are the odd civilization because this culture is not rooted in the sacred.
Isn't it confusing when we say, you're all one? Would it be helpful if we said to another person or to ourselves, you are many?
Yes, I mean, it actually reminded me of the second part of the talk I didn't give because I got carried away. Because I had two approaches to oneness, and I never got to the second because I got carried away. And the other is there is a oneness in which we see the connections and how we are all connected and how we are all part of this interconnected web of life. And that is a oneness in the many. And it is like this experience when you see the unique note you have to play in the symphony of life. And the symphony of life needs that note, needs your unique oneness to create this bigger oneness. And it is this, I suppose you call it unity in diversity, which is this other aspect that Father Keating was talking about of the oneness expressing itself through the many, which is one of the mysteries of, extraordinary mysteries of creation, that everything is unique. My teacher, she used to say that you can see that there is only, that everything is one because everything is different. Only a great artist never repeats himself or herself. And so you can see in the uniqueness of everything that there is a great artist at work, and that is the oneness of which we are an expression. And it is this extraordinary uniqueness that, as Father Keating was saying, the Sufi says that he never repeats himself in the same form twice. And everything is different and everything is unique. And in that uniqueness, there is the oneness. What I feel is that we have taken this individuality to its, in a way, to its extreme. And the next step is to realize that our uniqueness is an expression of the uniqueness of God. And that is the true, from a Sufi point, the true realization of one's humanity is in relation to God. So that is the uniqueness, one's complete individuality, which in a way, in our culture, we are taken to realize our own uniqueness. But it only has significance either in relationship to God or in relationship to the whole, which is the same. Oh, it is a divine paradox, yes. Mystical truth can only be understood by paradox. We are one and we are many. It is one of the extraordinary paradoxes of creation, I think.
Well, there's no doubt that language is certainly a problem. And when you say oneness, it can be not only oneness, but it can also be different levels of oneness or different aspects. Without getting into the ultimate oneness, which is something perhaps special and involves a total transformation into God, there are ways in which things are equal that are not numerically equal. There's an equality that is not by any means numerical in the sense that we become God in every way, but rather by participation in God. Life, which is a definition of what grace really means. Take, for instance, the genetic nature of human birth and generation. We share the genes of our parents, and so there's something of our parents that is continued or expressed in us. Maybe we also inherit other characteristics that are yet to be identified. But we remain equally human but distinct. We remain members of the family, though we have our own unique status in the family as children. So when it comes to speaking of oneness with God, we perhaps should start with the realization that oneness also means sharing in the divine life without being numerically identified with the Godhead or with the divine. So one participates in the divine as a gratuitous gift. And this is a little different from saying everything is just one. It also is infinitely diverse at the same time. And this is why the Buddhists prefer not to talk about these things. Because you can never say two things that are opposite yet true at the same time and make sense to yourself or to others. So perhaps it would help to think of God as the womb of creation. This would add a welcome note of femininity to his otherwise rather masculine reputation. But actually, Scripture hints that God is a mother in several places. Remember the text in Isaiah, can a mother forget the child of her womb? Well, God says through Isaiah, if she could, I will never forget you. He's speaking to Israel. So in other places it speaks of God picking up the people of Israel as a mother picks up her child and cuddles her or him at her breast and so on. So when you're trying to discuss the infinite, you better shut up fairly soon. Or you get into trouble that you deserve. And I acknowledge my adventurous spirit in getting into oneness. But here again, science offers us a few things that are worth trying to grasp an expanded view of God and not to think of him as boxed or having a form or other things that are rather pedestrian. But here, God, in some anthropologists, and certainly in Ken Wilber, we hear about the holon. A holon is a unique reality that's complete in itself, but is present within a higher reality or in a further development. It's totally present there, but it's totally itself in that broader presence. So we could say that a particle is present in an atom, and an atom is present in a molecule is present in a cell, and the cell is present in an organ or a flesh, nervous system, and the cell is present in a whole body, or the organs are present as part of a body, and the body has a spirit, so the body is present in that, at least in that conception. And so everything is itself and present, but it's also present within a presence, all of which are in continuity. So it's the continuity of creation, the interdependence and interconnectedness of everything, that a holon, that concept, might help us to see that we're both distinct from all the other holons, and yet ourselves, and yet we're sharing in a greater oneness, which is the ultimate source of everything that is, that we call the ultimate mystery or God in the Judeo-Christian tradition. So the advantage of thinking of God as a womb and not just any old holon is that it emphasizes that everything is growing and has a purpose. It's meant to come, at least in the perspective of people interested in the transformative process, we're being developed like an embryo in this divine womb of creation, to be born, not to die, but to be born into the higher kind of, or the fullest kind of life, which is a union with God. And of course, that developing embryo becomes a full body and so on. And the main thing we should remember is that it's a good idea to get on well with all the other people in the womb. Conflict is not suitable for that environment. So maybe it's a little fantastic for some of you, but to realize that it's always one is in God, and that all our suffering it's not just ours, but it's in God. And in virtue of creation as the body of God, then everybody else's suffering or ours are contributing to the healing or the balancing or the equilibrium of this dynamic balance between health and unevolved states into further integration of the human adventure. So the project seems to be to integrate our vegetative and animal instincts that are necessary to live in this world into the higher vision of rational consciousness, and then to move beyond that, having experienced that, the limitations of that kind of consciousness, to the levels of oneness that are much more interested. Well, now when you get into accessing some of those levels of intuitive and unitive consciousness, then the oneness appears automatically. You don't have to cultivate it. Your inner eye of faith that I spoke of earlier is opened so that you perceive this oneness, not in a way that you could define it or that does away with diversity once and for all. But for instance, here's what you would see in unity and diversity. You would see that diversity is divisive if there is not unity in its roots. On the other hand, diversity becomes enrichment if there is a basic unity. And so this is not a change in reality, but a change in us, which is able to see that now, that differences don't have to be disastrous or lead to a fight or a war or something else that is basically subhuman. It can lead to an acceptance of the enrichment of the universe as it's expressed differently by different people. And so, oneness, therefore, is the most simple of concepts, and yet it's a simplicity that is the result of almost infinite diversity and complexification once it is completely ordered and integrated into a interdependent and basically supportive environment. When is this going to happen? Up to you. And us and I, because it's this vision of the human family, of reality, that can change the horrors of the present social mix-up and the harm of possible harm of globalization that is not based on a sense of human unity and appreciation. One other example, if we have time. Are we going over?
No, we're fine. We have lots of time.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay more for the hall. Well, just an example of what I mean, and I'm only talking around something. I'm not giving any answer, really. But one time when Mother Teresa, and I think John Vanier, the founder of L'Arche, a community for handicapped people, Henry Nouwen was a member for a while, they were visiting hovels in India. And they went into this one little hut. And they saw that the mother and the children were on the verge of starvation. And they gave her some money. She immediately went next door and gave half of it to her neighbor. When she came back, I guess Jean Beignet couldn't help but say, "How could you do that? Your children are starving." And she said, "Well, so are my neighbors." In other words, she did that without thinking. Certainly she never thought this was a great virtue or heroic. It was natural and spontaneous for her because through poverty and their difficulties together, she had identified with those other people as herself. And so her particular problem was not separate. It was distinct, but not separate. Well, it's this kind of attitude that arises in the transformative process. And that process involves our change of seeing reality, so that every time you make a new leap of faith, hope, or love, or a new stage of consciousness, everything in your life is affected and changes, and then you have to spend some years working that insight into all your relationships and ways of thinking and so on. And then you probably be invited to have a crisis and then move on to the next level. But the crisis is only in us. It's not God's will. He wants us to be happy. But to negotiate this journey regards situations where you have to let go of the false self, self-identity. Any possessive attitude at all is not appropriate for transformation or heaven. There's no possession there. So if we go there with that, we'll feel very out of place. Like you go to a party and you don't know any of the people there. You know? So that's, I think that's the meaning of Jesus' parable about how hard it is for a rich to get into the kingdom. The eye of a needle is clearly a ridiculous image that involves a certain amount of humor. But what Jesus is saying is anyone with a possessive attitude that they're attached to is rich in the sense that he's been. And it makes it hard for the transformative process to continue. And so we have to let go of desires when God asks for them, or any over-identification with anything at all, including ourselves, in order to enter into this idea of oneness to the point of being the other, let alone of seeing that God, as Paul puts it, is all in all, or that Christ is, as God, is everything in everyone. Again, it's both yes and no. It's both true and not quite complete. So all we can do is wait for death. Solve all problems, yes.
The first step we need to achieve before becoming awake is to realize we have been asleep. I used to believe that it was a one-time process. As I get older, I realize that it's a minute-by-minute process. Could you just share with us some of your insight about the process of becoming aware?
It's kind of a long question.
I think that was for you.
That was for me. There are two parts of this. I remember when I was young and I read about early Sufis, and they never slept because they were praying all the time, and there's this whole thing of the heart and the prayer being constantly awake. And I tried that because I was young and very enthusiastic, and I found, after about 4 nights of not sleeping at all, it's hard going. And then years later, I actually had the experience that comes the time, and I have a friend, a Sufi friend called Lynn Barron, who has a different Sufi teacher. She had a similar experience. There comes a time when the heart is continually awake, when the heart is continually praying. And it is all the time, and then if you like, then something else takes over. There is this inner wakefulness, there is this inner awareness. One can call it divine presence if you like, that is awake within one. But until that happens, one has to have this minute by minute, the Sufis call it remembrance. You continually put your attention back to this remembrance of the heart, and you forget, and then you go back to this remembrance, and you forget, and you go back to this remembrance. And it is actually quite hard work, and it's a long process. But what I'm saying is that there does come a time when something then awakens within you. It is not that you are awake. I don't think as a human being, with an ego and a mind, we can be continually awake, but something then wakes up. For the Sufis, it's called the awakened heart. And it then remains like that for the rest of the incarnation. It's then the journey, it's like the next stage on the journey. It is, I suppose in Sufism, it's what we call bakar, abiding in God. But there is this stage when one is continually awake. But yes, until that happens, it is a process that requires a lot of diligence and for the Sufi remembrance, which is remembrance of God, because it is God in oneself that then becomes awake. Yeah?
I'd like to just suggest the importance in this context that the question was raised in of fidelity to silent meditation. By that I don't mean absolute silence. That's not something we can produce on our own, but we can prepare ourselves for it by faithfully giving a certain period of time each day, and hopefully twice a day, just to be in God's presence and to be as intentionally not thinking. By not thinking, I don't mean there won't be thoughts, but one has the intention of not thinking about the thoughts, because that's when one is engaged and one begins to withdraw from the attitude of total self-surrender. Centering prayer, for instance, begins with emptiness, or as the Greeks put it, kenosis, which means you sit down with the intention of consenting and self-surrender. So it predisposes one to what is fundamental in contemplation, which is to let go of the false self and to let the true self come forward. But the consoling thing about regular practice of non-conceptual, at least intentional, opening to God or prayer or whatever you want to call it, sitting with the ultimate reality, listening to God is another good way of putting it. Because when you listen, you're not doing anything, but you're alert and you're eager to hear if the music or the speaker is good. In any case, silence is cumulative. And as it grows within us, automatically, just by doing it, whether your psychological experience is positive or not so positive, or whether you're bored to tears at times, or whether you're flooded with nonsense in the way of thoughts you can't get rid of, it's working. If you do it, it'll do you. Because as the silence spreads, by osmosis you become godlike, or as we say in Christianity, you develop the dispositions of the head of the mystical body. You develop the spirit of Christ, which is all spontaneously, all of the fruits of the Spirit, and notice what they are: charity, joy, peace, gentleness. They arise not by effort, but just by being still and letting them express themselves as one lets go of the false self and our over-identification with programs for happiness that can't work based on our instinctual needs. So what I would suggest as a further development of Llewellyn's answer, that we, at least one of the ways that I think he will, the surest ways of proceeding, there are always some mistakes we make along the way, is to commit ourselves to these 2 20-minute or half-hour periods a day. As I've grown older and busier, I try to do 2 or 3 hours a day of silent prayer. And of course, I know that I couldn't even survive with the work that I do without that amount of emptying of myself best I can, and sometimes I'm not too good at it. But the silence grows just by hanging out in it. And the silence and God, in some mysterious way I can't in any way explain, are the same thing. Silence and God. As God is, not as you think he is, of course. So silence enables one, or enables God, I should say, to introduce himself as he actually is. And no words can do that.